As the first meeting with my master approached, my anxiety would flare in waves. I was still excited by every message, and my husband loved to see my expression when the next message arrived. But as we started discussing what was to come, my husband recognized he would need to help me figure out what part of the transition from fantasy to reality was triggering my anxiety. Neither of us were surprised to find there were multiple factors involved. While it's common for men to be concerned about performance anxiety, and pharmaceutical sales have an entire sector specifically for this concern, I had my own feelings of inadequacy about performing blowjobs and being on top. My marriage focused on my pleasure, so I never had to do anything I didn't want to do. Obviously, there are pros and cons to that arrangement. Because I'm tall, some positions aren't as easy as guys expect them to be. And then I feel awkward, which is definitely not as great as feeling sexy. For those of you keeping up, my master issued a punishment preventing me from any sexual touch in the 2 weeks prior to our first meeting. My husband and I agreed that I could practice a couple of times before we met my master, specifically to help me relax and feel better about my performance. Our goal was to be sure I was able to enjoy myself on that day. We were strategic about our process. There's a sex therapist on YouTube named Helena Nista. She has a wide variety of videos, so I highly recommend her channel. Her approach to a topic is more useful and instructional than much of the information I've seen previously. After we reviewed a video together, we would discuss it, and I might ask my husband some questions for clarification. We would have a practice round, and my husband would offer feedback, so I could adjust. We did not discuss this practice with my master. One of the things my master mentioned was his preference for thongs and G-strings, as well as his favorite color blue. Since those were not in my current lingerie collection, my husband and I began shopping. I did order several things, but we were having difficulty finding something appropriate that would arrive in time. Blue isn't impossible to find, but it's not always available. That shouldn't be a big deal. But it was.
To me.
My husband finally suggested we get something completely different, ignoring the blue altogether, and just focus on maximizing my assets to make the best first impression. We would still have the blue lingerie for later, but I would feel good about this meeting. With that in mind, we found the sexiest black bra and panty I could with a lovely matching garter belt and stockings. We even added a long gauzy robe to float around me. No outfit is complete without black heels. In case you think I have now covered all of my bases, let me assure you I can still find things to freak out about. I found myself suddenly concerned with the grooming of my intimate areas. Not only have I groomed, but am I grooming correctly? At this time in my life, I've made it a point to avoid being naked in front of anyone other than my husband, except for the occasional medical professional. When those thoughts occurred to me previously, usually in a medical facility, I would reassure myself about my grooming by constantly repeating, "They've seen worse." When I mentioned it to my husband, he was forced to ask himself the same questions. While the internet has answered any number of questions on this journey, it did not provide a definitive answer here. The spectrum is wide and feels a bit like the story of the three bears, with each of us acting as Goldilocks to figure out what works. I did learn not to try a new product just before an important event. If you experience a reaction, it may take a few days to completely resolve. Telling myself they've seen worse will not help in this situation. I was lucky, and it resolved before the big day. Please like and click subscribe in the bottom right-hand corner.